Glenn Henninger,
Here.
Tim Trueblood,
Here.
Greg Hall,
Here.
Chuck Triplett,
Here.
Mike Bellis,
Here.
Kara Horton,
Here.
Thomas Curran, Thomas Malinchuk. We have a quorum.
My name is Mark Grimm. I'm with Gilmore & Bell Law Firm, and I'm going to be advising the TIF Commission on this as we walk through the process, and going to lead the meeting for just a few minutes until we elect the officers, or at least elect the chairperson. Because of the roll call, I think we can skip over the introduction of members and go straight to the election of officers. I'll ask if there's a nomination for chairperson.
I'd like to nominate Tim Trueblood.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor of Tim Trueblood as chairperson?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, Mr. Trueblood.
We next have to have an election, first of all, nomination for vice chairperson. Do I have any nominations?
This will be posted on Crestwood now.
I'll nominate Glenn. Greg, excuse me, pardon. I got too many times. Greg, to be vice chairman. Do I have a second?
I'm sorry, who are you nominating?
Greg Hall.
Greg Hall.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Do I have a voice vote, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed?
Can I get Craig, what's your last name?
Hall.
Hall. Thank you.
Do we need a secretary? Asking for nominations for that position.
I'd like to nominate Mike Bellis.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please? Thank you very much. Tonight we're going to have we have to designate, according to state statute, the keeper of the records, and we're going to designate, or at least I would move if that's necessary, make a motion to designate the city clerk as the custodian of our records. So let's set that forth as a motion. Can we have a motion to that effect, please?
I move that we designate the city clerk as the keeper of the record.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed, please? Motion carries. Secretary, custodial records will be the city clerk. Then we're going to have an explanation of tax increment financing. I'd like to turn the mic over to
I'll keep this brief because I think most people have a pretty good understanding of tax increment financing, but I do want to make sure everyone is on the same page. Tax increment financing is designed to encourage redevelopment of blighted and conservation areas. The TIF does not capture any existing tax revenues. As the name implies, TIF captures incremental revenues. So when TIF is approved, TIF, all of the taxing districts continue to receive all of the revenues that they received prior to the adoption of TIF. As redevelopment occurs, the assessed valuation of the property would be expected to increase, and TIF captures most of the incremental property taxes, real property taxes associated with that increase in assessed valuation. TIF does not capture the commercial surcharge, which in St. Louis County is $1.70 per $100 of assessed valuation. So TIF captures 100% of the incremental real property taxes other than the commercial surcharge. TIF also captures the 50% of the incremental sales taxes. It does not capture the other 50%. The other 50% continues to be distributed to the sales taxing jurisdictions. TIF does not capture any personal property taxes. So to the extent that there are if there's any new personal property associated with a redevelopment project, All of the personal property taxes associated with the personal property are distributed to the property taxing jurisdictions. TIF can remain in place for a maximum of 23 years. You're going to hear tonight about taxing community improvement district and a proposed transportation development district. These are special purpose districts. These are separate political subdivisions that impose new taxes that otherwise would not be generated by a project. And so if there's a 1% CID sales tax, a 1% TDD sales taxes, so those are taxes that would otherwise not be generated and contribute toward the total eligible redevelopment project costs. In an upcoming meeting, you're going to receive a draft of a redevelopment plan and a draft of a cost-benefit analysis. And those documents will set out the framework for redevelopment. Understand that TIF and the approval of TIF by the TIF Commission and by the Board of Aldermen, as the board chooses to approve TIF, does not in and of itself confer any rights upon the developer. There will be a separate redevelopment agreement that gives the developer the right to be reimbursed for certain of its costs if development occurs. So the redevelopment plan sets out the framework for redevelopment. It identifies the characteristics of the property that qualify it as a blighted area, and then it sets out the maximum amount of assistance that can be provided for the project. But then it requires a separate redevelopment agreement in order to confer those rights upon the developer. A cost-benefit analysis will be prepared that shows the impact on each taxing district if TIF is in fact adopted. The cost-benefit analysis will also show the tax revenues that each district will receive during the term of the TIF that are not captured by TIF. PGAB consulting firm will prepare those documents and will present those documents to the TIF Commission at a subsequent meeting. The TIF Commission does not usurp any other commission or governmental authorization. It's not a planning and zoning board. So the TIF Commission's sole job is to hold a public hearing with respect to the redevelopment plan that is presented to the TIF Commission, and then to make a recommendation following the public hearing, we'll make a recommendation to the Board of Aldermen as to whether to adopt TIF or not. So the developer would still have to go through all of the other approvals that are consistent with any other development project in the city. The two key findings required by the TIF Commission as part of any recommendation are, first, that the area qualifies as a blighted area or a conservation area under the statutes, and second, that but for the adoption of TIF, redevelopment would not reasonably be anticipated to occur. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions regarding TIF or the role of the TIF Commission, or you certainly are welcome to ask at any other meeting or later on tonight.
You mean by that, once the board members, is that correct?
That's right.
Does anyone have any questions? If you would just push the button in front of you, recognize you to speak. I see no questions. And those lights come on. Would it be possible at this point that we have a presentation of the redeveloped project? I believe that the developer or his representatives are going to be here. Mr. Bob Burke, please, sir, if you can come forward. Will we do will we want to do the process of name, address on these for your records?
Mr. Burke, we're fine. If that's.
Who anyone speaks to is from
Yes,
the
if-
floor. Okay,
Yes,
so
that is.
we'll just set that as the standard for anyone speaking to this commission. That you'll have to identify yourself, and your residence, and then speak. Thank you, sir.
Good evening. My name is Bob Burke. I'm the managing partner at the Urban Street Group. We're a Chicago-based real estate development firm. And I just want to start off very quickly and thank you for organizing this, and thank you for meeting with us. Our presence here tonight is kind of the culmination of about the last 16 or 18 months. Since we purchased the property, we've been actively working on a redevelopment plan, and for the past, since March, when we formally responded to the RFP from the city, we've been actively engaged with their consultants, our own consultants, their legal counsel. So I appreciate it very much, and I thank Mr. Grimm, and I'm joined here tonight by Pam Wuker, who works with us here in St. Louis, and our counsel, Bill Keeling and Barbara Geisman. So with that being said, our goals here tonight are to introduce myself to you guys. I've had the fortune of meeting with quite a few of you independently, and to kind of outline for us verbally our proposal that we submitted a few months ago. So I'm going to try to run along here with this thing, but basically the site, we all, I think, are aware of it. It's a 47-acre parcel at the corner of Sappington and Watson Road. At the time of its inception, it was obviously a very vibrant piece of property. Over the course of the last few years, it has diminished in that. It is the largest site, development site available in the city of Crestwood. It's very key to the city's image as well as to the corridor of Watson Road, and it has some serious economic impact, obviously, given its history and what it is. Over the course of the last few months, like I stated, we've been actively engaged in a formal process with the city that went informally for months prior to that. In March, we responded to the formal process of an RFP request from the city of Crestwood. We presented a plan that basically outlined our goals for the site, our request for participation from the city and in the form of tax incremental financing. And we have basically been active, like I've stated, over the course of the last few months, formulating a plan that we felt was worthy to present to you guys. That plan is in their hands and has been, and we're now in the process of trying to formalize it. In brief, my firm has been in business. I've been active in the real estate business and formed my company 27 years ago. The primary focus of our business over the course of the last 27 years has been, the vast majority has been adaptive reuse. We have an enormous history of creative reuse of different properties in suburban areas, urban areas. We have in-house design and legal. We have, over the course of the years, tackled a very, very wide range and diverse project portfolio, which we feel is very uniquely suited to attacking this project. We've done all these different component pieces at various stages all over the place. This is a rare opportunity to bring our skill sets to bear on one location. We obviously are extensively based in Chicago. We have hundreds of residential units under construction there. We own office buildings, retail outlets, hospitality outlets. We have a presence here in downtown St. Louis. Over the course of the last couple of years, we've been active in downtown in the CBD. We purchased a property portfolio there a few years ago. We have close to a couple of hundred residential units here in St. Louis downtown. We own the Orpheum Theater. We owned the Mayfair Hotel until recently. We sold that to a group out of Denver. So we've been very active in the marketplace down here. We feel like we've been contributing to date, and we're excited to potentially expand that position here with the mall. A little bit of the site history, as you guys probably know better than anybody. The site was originally constructed in the 50s. At its time, it was one of the largest regional malls of its kind. It was really a success, a smashing success, and all the way through the early 2000s. At which point demographic shifts, there was a conscious decision by the ownership. I think it ended up being the focus shifted to malls out in other areas, and this mall steadily declined. It has been added on to over the years, as recently as the late 1990s. It constitutes almost 1 million square feet of retail space. There's 3 big anchors in there. There's a movie theater. It has obviously a rich history and occupies an extremely valuable, not only historically, but where we sit today in Crestwood's history, as well as where it needs to go future. In brief, we purchased the property at auction in April or May of 2014. The property has been the subject of multiple, or at least one very serious redevelopment effort prior to our participation in it. I think there was a combination of issues with that plan, but we were very happy and excited to get a hold of it when we did. This is a graphic illustration of the economic impact of what's gone on over there. As you can see, really as recently as the early 2000s, it was generating out of their sales tax revenue stream of almost $2 million, $1.7 million. That has steadily declined down to our current position of 0 sales dollars coming out of that asset currently. But that's a graphic demonstration of how quickly it declined. This graph illustrates the assessed valuation of the property. In 2004, the county assessor had the property valued at nearly $90 million in assessed valuation. By now, it's down. The most recent valuation on the assessor's rolls are close to $10 million or $9.5 million, so that represents an almost 90% decline in the assessed valuation of that property over the course of the last few years. The buildings themselves are obsolete. Like I stated earlier, we have a history of adaptive reuse. We look at everything we purchase from the idea of, is there any salvageability to it? These buildings, unfortunately, are mechanically obsolete. They're physically obsolete. As I mentioned, they've been added on to multiple times over the few years, or over the multiple years of its ownership. Its current state is in rapid decline. There's extensive water damage. There's some environmental conditions there. Again, we have analyzed this fully. We feel that the buildings need to come down to best utilize the site moving forward. We are very strong on that. We've analyzed it from every angle. The site also poses some other unique issues that might not be as evident to the naked eye when you're driving by it. There's some severe topographical issues with it. It drops almost 100 feet from Sappington down on the west down to its eastern border. And that will become more pronounced when the buildings themselves are removed. If you're familiar with the site, Dillard's occupies the east portion of the site, and you're looking at it from Watson. The area that appears to be ground around the Dillards is actually a parking structure that's subgrade 3 levels. So when that structure is removed, the topography becomes much more pronounced. So it's not just a flat land site that's ready to be reutilized. And that poses obviously an enormous expense and exposure to redevelopment potential. Because of that multi-tier topography, it's not set up for large-scale redevelopment. It needs to be broken into pods, and that's one of the issues that we went in with the city right out of the gate. Our goal is to bring forth a mixed-use development plan to this parcel for this reason, or well, for a multitude of reasons. But after we've analyzed this site, we feel that it really sets up very well to accommodate a mixed use of different types of uses, including retail, entertainment, potential grocery. We have a wide range of uses. One of the other interesting or concerns of the site is obviously, given its dated history, MSD, which is your water reclamation in your county, has enormous issues with it. We'll get to that in a second, but as we look at this site, it ends up breaking into, very clearly, into the three usable areas at the bottom of the sheet, which is the corner up near Sappington and Watson, the bulk in the middle there, which is orange, and then the lime green section. Again, remember that the topography there is rather substantially, and so your decline in some instances is 20 feet or so between each one of those. The dark green in the back represents the MSD requirements. That site, given its development from the 50s, it does not meet or even come close to meeting any sort of water reclamation, water detention, water purification issues. The runoff off of this site in its current condition is not even close to those regulations. So as we look at it, we need to address that, and that's that bandwidth in the back. And like I said, our goal here is conceptually to bring a mixed-use development, a walkable and a sustainable, self-contained environment down there that can also will reinvigorate this Watson Road corridor and bring people back into that central district right there. And by doing that, we think that by providing for all those multiple uses in there, not only activated in what we view is the most viable potential revitalization, but we also eliminate or mitigate as best as we can exposure from one sector failing, or if it's all entertainment or if it's all retail. As it sits, it's an obvious example that all retail is not very viable out there. Our key to our plan is as we've been very consistent with the city in presenting this throughout the last few months, is flexibility within some guidelines that are established. We've identified what we view as very potential and viable uses for the property. We've outlined those, and like I said, they include service retail or restaurants, grocery, a residential component, an entertainment component, a potential theater out there. Again, spreading that use exposure over multiple uses, and also then provides more of a community environment, a plaza, some green space, community gardens. We'll touch on that in a few minutes. One of the major issues that we're facing out there is obviously vehicular access. We've outlined utilizing the current ingress and egress lights, its traffic signalization is there. We feel that we might need to modify those mildly, and we're going to work with the city and we're going to work with MDOT and the county to address some Watson Road issues. There's some median issues out there and some right-of-way issues, but this basically formulates what we want to try to do internally on the site is to form a bit of a grid internally to flow traffic around and give a little bit more of a consistent flow internally rather than just a parking lot. This is the pedestrian outline. Our goal is to put more perimeter access sidewalks out along Watson Road that tie into existing sidewalks, as well as put a pedestrian path system in place, both paved as well as unpaved through the open space areas. We have a plaza planned. We've worked with the city to determine that. That would be available for programming by independent parties. The goal here was to provide some type of a centralized area that the city could kind of claim as a centralized area for activities, as well as having it tied in pedestrian-wise to the other uses within the development plan. This drainage issue that I mentioned earlier can't be underestimated. We have millions of dollars in potential expenses there to mitigate water runoff from this site. It's an enormous land issue as well as an expense to mitigate that water runoff. We've worked with our engineers, our contractors, and we've worked with the county metropolitan sewer district to come up with what is a viable plan. Again, I have to reiterate, this is a culmination of an enormous amount of work. We're presenting to you things that we view that are viable and have been vetted out up and down the chain. In creating those areas, one of the benefits of having those areas is that it does provide an enormous amount of green space in an otherwise kind of green space starved environment up and down an arterial road. We have community gardens set aside. Our property stretches all the way down the slope, basically, down into the industrial park. So our improvement will stretch not only from Watson and Sappington, but really encroach into the existing industrial park down at the bottom. We've planned for community garden space down there. That'll be available. We plan on cleaning that area up, tying that in with the green space above. So all of a sudden, in the midst of this massive concrete environment that we currently have, we're going to have an enormous, up to 11 or 13 acres of open space out there that'll be available, as well as just basically look incredible, I think, and mitigate water damage down the way. Our design concept is critical here. We have an opportunity with this scale of a project and with these divergent uses to bring an entire lifestyle back into the central core on Watson Road. But it's going to take an incredible amount of master planning, and that's where we think that we're going to excel. We want cohesive design of all these buildings. We want cohesive signage all the way through. Even though the uses are different, we want this thing to appear, and it will appear, as one cohesive unit and redevelopment plan. So as opposed to maybe other development plans where you have random uses and random design, by having a master plan developer responsible for the entire facility, we're going to be able to enforce design covenants. We are going to set forth the design of all these buildings, the signage, like I said, coordinated public right-of-way and street landscaping, all those elements that are the intangibles of how something feels the right way. And that is an extremely critical element to this. With us in the master planning role, we can dictate that and have what will appear at the end, like I said, to be a very cohesive plan for everybody. Here we get into the meat of it. This is why we're all here. The budget for this project is extensive. We're projecting a budget of close to a little in excess of $100 million if everything goes. Close to 26 or 27 million of that is infrastructure related. Therein lies the crux of our issue. We are looking at a substantial and quantifiable expense to get this property even into a stage or into a phase or a condition where it is developable, for lack of a better word. And this is where we have come up with basically our request for TIF and the CDD that was mentioned earlier in the TDD. Our TIF dollar request would be somewhere in the area of a potential recapture of $15 million, and we're looking at close to $10 million in SID and TDD recapture by the special districts. It's important to note after our review and working with the consultants, and that number is probably reduced, I think, a little over $3 million from our initial response to the RFP back in March. This goes to the heart of why we're here and why I'm standing up here and asking for participation. From day one, we were aware that the site had serious issues. And working with the consultants and working with our team, as well as namely the city's consultants, this is, we feel, as a textbook example of a TIF project. It's severely blighted. It has extraordinary infrastructure costs. We have what we feel are strong public benefit amenities. It is at the core, we feel, of what can rejuvenate that corridor along Watson Road. As we pointed out, our what we consider extraordinary infrastructure costs are demolition of these obsolete buildings, basically addressing this extraordinary site conditions of site slope and topographical issues, as well as the water management, which is an enormous issue. We view this as a linchpin to repositioning Watson Road. There's been an enormous amount of discussion about the residential component of this project. We are steadfastly in support of the school district. Our position is very clear. If there are market rate housing units going in there on the project, as outlined in the TIF agreement and in the redevelopment agreement, we get those specifics through that process, those taxes will pass through. We have the potential out there for a senior housing component. It is our desire to not have those funds. The school district was very explicit in their, and the community, quite frankly, and we listened to that. And the idea of students being placed into a school district without funding has never been our intent. So I want to be very clear on that. That's if there is market rate housing out there, we will not capture those taxes off the tip. For the tip. And where we are currently, there's also been a lot of requests. And what we have here is a situation where we're out in the marketplace right now, actively with our brokers, discussing and meeting with potential users. The users that we're engaged with fit into the parameters. We've been very consistent with that. They're out there. We are very, very confident that we can secure them. And what we've been discussing with the city, really, and then I'll discuss it with you, is that collectively we need to go out to that marketplace. This city, or excuse me, this site has a history in the marketplace. The potential users are aware of that history. They're aware, they are looking for a signal from collectively, again, from the private sector and the public sector that this project has the capacity to move forward. We have very, very strong interest from the users that we're talking to. And those users, as I stated, are potential theater, grocer, senior housing provider. But again, we are in a chicken and egg, for lack of a better term. We need to demonstrate that we can get this done ourselves as well as we can do that. I'm sorry, I jumped ahead here, but basically, we view this potential project, the benefits to the city are enormous. We remove the blighted condition out there. We enhance the city's image along Watson Road. We create a new shopping and retail and entertainment destination. We provide a housing option, and we also basically, in our opinion, will enhance the property values up and down Watson Road as well as in the entire surrounding community once this thing is removed and revitalized. To all taxing districts, because the city is only one of the benefactors of this. We think that, again, there's hard economic increases in the surcharges, even while the TIF is in place. That tax, given that prior graph that I showed, we're pretty bottomed out there. So any increase there, which we feel very strongly will occur even with the TIF in place, will progressively enhance the economic benefits for all taxing bodies up and down the line. We're going to obviously enhance that stormwater issue, which I mentioned earlier. Again, I want to thank you guys. I want to thank everybody involved. And particularly want to thank the city and Mayor Roby and his staff and the consultants that have been working very tirelessly on all of our behalf to try to get something in a format that we can present to you. Again, I want to reiterate, and Mark did a great job, for the folks that the TIF is, as Mark pointed out, an incremental financing instrument that only those benefits don't come to us unless we deliver. And I sometimes think that message might be lost out in the public realm. I understand the concerns. We are prepared financially as well as with our staff, prepared to move forward on this. We're excited about it. It's a big project for us, and we again appreciate your time and your consideration on this. So, and I hope that summarized it in a fashion that you guys. And if you have any questions of me, I'm obviously.
Mr. Burke, thank you for your presentation. Before you sit down, I would like to ask, is there any commissioners that have any questions? Please do so and ask Mr. Burke what he's doing for us, and he's got staff with him. You're recognized. I'm sorry.
I have several, should I?
Please go right ahead.
Okay. So, in the proposal that you originally presented, which we are looking at, the environmental demolition and site work equals a little bit about 21 million. You're now saying it's 27 million. What is the difference? 6 million?
Yeah, I think that if I'm not mistaken, I think we may have included in there our assessment of where we stand currently with the property values, of what place of value we're placing on our statement. Is that correct?
Well, I guess first, are you saying that the cost estimate for infrastructure work was?
It was 21 million in the document.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
looking at now. He said 27 million.
Right, and I think part of that is attributable to the fact that more work was done to accurately estimate the cost of the.
Qualifying costs, excuse me.
Okay.
Thanks for jumping
With respect to the senior housing versus the just regular
Right.
housing, is that something that you would have put in the development agreement so that it would be guaranteed to the school district?
in. Absolutely.
Alright. Then, okay, I actually had a chance to do a little bit of research. And one of my concerns with the residential housing is the prices. I know you're saying that this is, what is the word to use? It's like no, not the market rate, like the people choose on their own to live in these
Absolutely.
apartments,
Mhm.
right? You had a term for it, but
Renter by choice, I guess.
renter by choice, that
That's
would
exactly
be
right.
it. So, anyway, I looked around at some of these rates, and essentially, right, your 2-bedroom, 2-bath, you have listed on this at $1,850 a month. That is essentially looking at current mortgage rates. You're looking at about a $300,000 mortgage,
That's
right?
exactly right.
Okay, and as I looked around at some of the different home prices, rentals, etc., Lindbergh average home price right around 200,000.
That's
Okay,
correct.
so 300,000 in Lindbergh can get you fairly
Absolutely.
decent house, right?
Mhm.
Looking at the rentals, the rental prices, we're looking more around 800 than we're looking at 1850. And we're looking, if you look in Clayton, you're getting more comparable prices with that 1800. You're looking at, in Kirkwood, you might even get closer.
Absolutely.
I would assume that our demographic to be paying, 1,800 a month on an apartment, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, is a professional of some sort, typically without children, I would say.
Absolutely.
And I really don't see the draw to Crestwood versus paying that same amount of money in Clayton, where you can live there, you can walk around, you might work in Clayton, you might work downtown. There's not an interstate immediately next to
Right.
the mall development. There's not the bars, the
Sure.
entertainment, all that you're going to find in Clayton or downtown. And actually, I looked at your own development, the old post office, and let me see if I can find my numbers here. Okay, so the lofts at the old post office,
Right.
for 1,100 square feet, it's $1,525 a month, whereas for 1,115, we're looking at $1,850 in Crestwood. So, I mean, I guess that's a long way of saying,
Well, yeah, and I
there's a
can
lot
address-
of concerns. I mean,
There
I'm
is.
sure you
That's,
researched this,
yeah,
but
absolutely, and it's a very viable, it's a very, extremely viable question. This is what we do. The market rate housing, we designed it, we think that it's viable. We are looking at alternatives, not only because we are analyzing the market, we think that that's why we're introducing the concept of a potential senior housing component. To answer your questions very specifically, we have built hundreds of these units, and you nailed it. People pay more almost to live in these things than housing, than to own a single-family house. And that really goes to the core of this renter by choice demographic, and we are seeing it all over the country. And it's a very unique dynamic because, quite frankly, it hasn't existed for a very, very long time. We have a close to 200 unit apartment complex being built right now in a suburb of Chicago that hasn't seen a new market rate apartment in over 30 years. These units, and more importantly, the complexes that are built are so substantially different than anything that's out there that's very difficult to compare it to. And you're right, our OPOP downtown, it even has less amenities than something like this would offer out here. We look at a multitude of factors, and certainly downtown Clayton or TOD is one aspect of that. The job center around Crestwood, which is why why this community has the strength that it has, is there's a substantial employment base. We feel that there's viability there for market rate rental housing. The statistics that you're citing in there are examples of that might not be exactly specifically what we're going to get out of that unit after we design it. But to your fundamental question, you are accurate. This market rate housing brings in a demographic that is choosing to rent there over ownership.
what I don't believe though, and there's some, I talked to some of the younger attorneys at my work, asking them, because that's the demographic you're going to get. They wouldn't move out here because they could live, one lives like right across from Forest Park, and will pay the $1,800
No, there are a lot of
to
alternatives.
live across from Forest Park. And I guess my concern is, I moved out here because I love the district, I love the neighborhood area, but I don't know if you can get that kind of money.
Well, and that's why we're continuing to analyze that both from a market rate housing standpoint, and that's one of the reasons, quite frankly, one of a multitude of reasons that we're looking at alternative. Our main push on this, like I stressed at the beginning, is a mixed-use environment. We feel that it's very important to have a residential component, whether it's senior housing or market rate housing, as part of this redevelopment plan it offers. And we can vary the economics of those units depending on how we design them and what our ultimate market research lends us to believe, or lends us to design. But we are looking at all different alternatives. But the main purpose of that, again, is to introduce this idea that in our minds we need to have mixed use out there, whether it's residential, market rate. And again, before we would take that enormous exposure to build that unit, we would continue our market research. Our initial research indicates that an upscale product could get absorbed. Now, at what level, we would continue to analyze that, but we feel very strongly that there needs to be a residential component to the project.
And with the senior housing, would it be somehow, is it subsidized?
Absolutely not,
It would
no.
be, because I can't imagine
No.
our seniors in the area paying this price either? Would it be a lower?
No, actually, we're not in that business. We've, as I said earlier, we've been establishing relationships, and we have a high level of interest from a national senior housing operator that has shown an enormous amount of interest in this site.
Okay. I have 2 more questions, if that's okay. All right. So then, I know when you pulled together this original presentation, I know it's been probably 6-9 months ago, you said you were like in the final negotiations with the theater to come in here.
That's
Has
correct.
that come to fruition, or is that still pending until you can get this
pending
taken
this.
care of? Okay, and then last, I don't remember what page this is on, but you talk about doing this in phases, which clearly makes sense. But, let me find page 11. My question is, okay, so you have down here phase 1, environmental remediation, phase 2, demolition of existing structures, 3, site utilities, stormwater management, phase 4, building construction will be phased over time in response to market demand. What does that mean?
It means quite specifically that once it's whoever shows up to that party first, for lack of a better term. Once we make the commitment to demolishing this building, and once we feel comfortable that we have the potential to recapture some of these expenses, what that means is that we would put in the spine of the infrastructure. If the theater is first in line, that goes first. If the retail or potential grocer or the housing, we just wanted to indicate that there would be a potential staggering to this. If everybody shows up, we're game on. I would love that. But that was very specifically to indicate that the market is going to dictate, because the first guy that inks it is the first one in the door. And we can gear our development and our infrastructure to meet those needs. And so that's what that means.
What kind of language will be in the redevelopment agreement if, let's say, so you build, let's say, the residential first, but then you're not able to find a theater or a retail or a restaurant? What kind of an out are you looking for in the redevelopment agreement if that's not feasible?
If I'm not mistaken, that exposure rests squarely on us. It's very important to this idea of recapture and repayment is a very critical term, and I think it's very critical to understand that the only one getting repaid here over time is we're the ones taking that exposure, and I think that that's very, very important. So I'm glad you brought that up. As far as the development agreement, we're going to have benchmarks in there that are going to set targets that if we don't meet certain standards, of course, or if it changes, then there's going to have to be revisiting to it. But that exposure and that repayment is ours.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Pam?
You have in your presentation that there are going to be 4 redevelopment project areas. Will they all be started up at the same time so that they'll all run concurrently for the 23 years?
They are not formal.
Please come to the microphone so we can record. I'm sorry.
For phases, not redevelopment.
Yeah, it's not intended that there be formal RPAs. Those are just how.
So it's one.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
That's correct.
Have you looked at the surrounding areas to see, where the other, if you are intending to get a grocery store in, where are there other grocery stores in the area? And have you done any analysis of the actual shift of sales tax rather than a generation of new sales tax?
Yes, we've done extensive retail gap studies, is what they call them, and again, we wouldn't be in the grocery business. We're attempting to get that grocer in, and those potential tenants or participants in this process are doing extensive studies, both cannibalization off of other stores, where these dollars are going, are they going outside? They do basic market research in concentric circles outside of this core, and the data that's out there is incredible. So yes,
And the only other question I have is, you have, looks like a fairly large neighborhood behind this area. Is there going to be access, pedestrian access from those neighborhoods? I don't really see anything on your kind of
No, it
plan.
really doesn't lend itself to that. That neighborhood that's to our north, every house, that's all private property that abuts us back there.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Any other questions from the commission? Yes.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Tonight's proposal has some different numbers in it than what the commission received earlier. When will that be available to us, so we can have the current numbers?
The city's consultants, PGAB, are working on that, and I would assume that that'll be over as soon as they have it. That's more on their hands.
Appreciate it. Curious, you've stated a couple of times that mixed use, some residential is very important to this. Why is that important and not some form of commercial or retail or entertainment throughout the whole development?
Well, for the most obvious reasons, we just don't believe that it can be supported. You've got an enormous retail component. There's been a fundamental shift up Watson Road towards the expressway. We believe that, again, it doesn't dilute, but it mitigates the risk a little bit when you have multiple different sectors out there. If it was all entertainment, unfortunately, if we had a bowling alley, a movie theater, a laser tag, a large entertainment complex, when that sector takes a shot, every one of those tenants is going to take a shot. And what we're seeing is just a fundamental return, quite frankly, to more walkable and sustainable environments, and people want vibrancy there, and they want that action there all the time. So this is, in our opinion, and really is nationwide, is that by supplementing those uses, we're directly mitigating exposure as well as creating a much better environment.
Okay. And why is it not possible to get contingency agreements from any of these retailers prior to the TIF being approved?
We were about as far along as we think that we can go, and that's a very simple question, or it's a great question, and there's a very simple answer. It's not on their radar. You're dealing with they make commitments based on potential delivery dates, and at current, we can't provide a delivery date, nor can we provide sound economics. We're not in a position to commit.
And they want to do a contingency commitment with no cost.
We're about as far along as we can get.
Okay. How will revenue estimates be calculated without specific tenants to know what type of revenue might exist?
Well, we've narrowed down basically the potential uses, and we've run multiple scenarios based on enormous pools of data that the consultants have and that we have at our disposal. And we base our projections off the highest and best uses that we feel that we can get in there, and the highest level of interest that we've had from different tenants. And so that's where we base that off of. And back to your point, which was extremely valid, ultimately that exposure rests with us.
Okay. The extensive research and data that you have, will that be made available to the commission?
We can certainly provide summary data. A lot of it was from the consultants, so we'll have to determine how that can even be delivered. But again, we use multiple things. We wouldn't be here if we didn't think this was viable. I mean, it's an extremely risky business. Don't get me wrong, but that risk is ours.
Okay. Being a school district, in the last 10 years, we've done extensive construction on all 8 of our campuses.
Mm-hmm.
Currently, we're building a new elementary school. So we sympathize with you with your interactions with MSD, knowing the requirements and the costs. But why aren't those costs just part of doing business?
They're extraordinary there because this site has currently 0. So we're not expanding reclamation, we're not expanding detention, we're creating it raw. There is none there.
Okay. And I'm just curious, last July you had an open house, big turnout from the community. The results of that haven't been released to the best of our knowledge. Will those be available?
Absolutely. We've been culling those over and determining, we've been utilizing them internally and certainly before the public hearing, which we view as the right time for that. Over the course of the next 6 weeks, we're gonna release that data in the best format that we can. There's an enormous amount of raw data, hundreds of post-it notes and such, but they've compiled it into what we feel is a presentable fashion.
Okay. And then a question for our friends from the county. Are we seeing other developments around the county that are similar to this, or very different from this? And how many of those would be considered for TIFs? Anything else similar for us to compare this to?
Well, I think the boulevard probably across from the gallery in Brentwood's the closest thing to what you call a true mixed use. This is a mix of uses. It's not urban mixed use, but I think it's probably what you could expect at this kind of a suburban location. But I do agree that there has to be a mix of uses and some population in the core to restore some vibrancy. I've been, I read a lot, on these sorts of land use issues, and I think if you just wanted to restore it all retail, you can kind of expect the same results. The market's going in a different direction. So I certainly buy the argument that it has to be a mix of uses and there has to be a residential component. It has to be very walkable within the development. We might ask some additional questions about, can there be a connection to the, better connections to the surrounding areas? Is there a possibility of getting a trail connection through the intervening industrial area to the Grants Trail? Those kinds of things. I would think in terms of the, getting vibrancy, that if there's a senior residential component, I hope it's not 100%. I hope there's at least a market component there. And the idea that there would be a path through to allow it to happen is, I think, good.
Are there any other redevelopment projects that are all retail, commercial, entertainment that are being considered for TIF right now, or are being built?
That have a strong residential component?
Without any residential.
Oh, without any? Well, right now, what do we have? Well, yeah, what we have right now is Maryland Heights, which is putting in a Worldwide Technologies corporate headquarters, and trying to restore the mixed-use strength of Westport, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. That Westport is kind of mixed-use. Doesn't have a residential component, but is outdoor, walkable, and in some respects ahead of its time. In the county, we have the Afton Plaza Center that is going under TIF review next month, but that's really that's not creating a new development. That's trying to refresh an old center.
Is mixed use being discussed for that, or strictly?
Not so much, no. That's straight up retail. But it has its issues because of its shape and the orientation of buildings. It's very odd.
I'm sure every development's unique, so just curious how we might compare to other developments in the county.
Thank you.
So you said the boulevard across from the Galleria, you've got, if there's residential, it's got to be above.
It is.
Okay, how many residential units are in there?
Boy,
Existing is about 70, and they're proposing another 160.
And where are those 160 going to be? Is it going to be a standalone building?
It's going to be set up just like the existing. There's going to be retail, office, whatever on the lower level, and then the apartments above.
And do we know?
so in some respects, it's similar to downtown Crestwood. The redevelopment of the old target site there.
It's a $98 million markup.
Okay.
And they're looking at about 20
So $1 million.
Okay.
So the boulevard is, what you see is like,
Do we have any other questions, Mr. Burke? Do you want to stay here? Is this
I'm available.
okay with that? I don't want to disrespect this position. So please go ahead, I'm sorry.
it is sort of sounding like a planning commission. But I guess it's interesting, so I like, to me. The boulevard, what you see there is just phase one, so they're going to double the size of the phase two. And I think overall, that's important to that project because it needs more mass, more scale for it to take off. It's doing well, don't get me wrong, but I think as they add to that, you get to where it's a real place.
Is it called, what's the name of it? I mean, I know the restaurants and stuff in there, but what's like the name so I can look it up?
Boulevard.
It's just called Boulevard, okay. Are there any developments that are, this is different than that, because this is not putting, apartments on top like you would see in downtown somewhere or.
That's what Glenn meant when he said it wasn't really an urban mixed use.
Yeah, is there anything out there, anywhere, that's similar, where you've got the mixed use, then you've got your standalone apartments off to the side?
There's not a perfect example. I guess if you go out to 141 in Clayton Road in Town and Country, you see shopping center with apartments around. It's spread out, so you might.
Was it all part of the same development?
It was, although it developed over time.
Okay.
Chesterfield, in Chesterfield, there's a large concept that was originally proposed that had the mall and high-density residential around a lot, some of which developed and a lot which did. And they're trying to create sort of an urban downtown behind the mall now. I'm getting way off the subject here, but.
I interrupted you, Chuck.
Okay.
Can I ask one more question? One more question?
Please.
Okay, sorry. Looking through most of the projects of your company, it's really been, I think, a much stronger focus more on the retail, or on the residential than the retail side. Do you feel as if your connections, contacts, agreements, whatever, with people in the retail, the restaurant, etc., theater, are they strong enough that you feel confident that you're going to be able to meet with these people and get it done?
I hope so, yes. I wouldn't know, I mean, I can't stress enough, we wouldn't be here. We put an enormous amount of time and effort and money into this. I wouldn't waste your time if we didn't think it was viable. But there is still exposure. We have to get out to that market as a communal team here, and we have got to show that this can happen, and hopefully it does. If it doesn't, that exposure again is on me, and we don't do it. And then you're not exposed, there's no TIF.
Mr. Burke, I want to ask if there are any other questions.
Great.
Are there any other questions for the commission? Then I want to thank you for your
Oh, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
The next order of business is setting a date for a public hearing. And it has been presented to me that the public hearing might be best be held on the 3rd of February. And I guess this commission needs to check their calendars, make sure that is an acceptable date. And I've seen a head pop up. Am I hoping it's the right date for you?
Well, it is for me.
Okay, is there any objection to that, so I can have a notification? This will be a public hearing. The question I have, and I'm concerned, I'll share it with the commission, is that we may have a population showing up that's greater than what the fire marshal allows us to hold in here.
Oh, Mr. Chairman,
Please.
the chief has advised that the community center is available that night. And so if that works for the commission, then we can, if that date works for the commission, then we could have a motion for time, date, and place would be the community center, and it's available.
Okay, then I'd like to have a motion that the 3rd of February, 7 p.m. at the called White Cliff Park Community Center will be the next location of this meeting. It will be the public hearing. Do I have a motion to that effect, please? Do I have a second?
Second.
We'll have all in favor, please?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you very much, Commission. That indicates that we're going to meet on the 3rd of February, 7 p.m. at the White Cliff Park Community Center. And the reason for our doing that is we're concerned about the number of people we can hold in the public. That will be a public hearing. Thank you, Mr. Frank. And then the next hearing date is for us to meet, which should be presented to us again, is January 20th of 2016, 7 p.m. I believe information I have, that we can still have that here. So unless there's any concern other than that, I'd like a motion to that effect. The next meeting of this commission be held on the 20th of January, 7 p.m. in this location. Could I have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead,
I
second.
will not be available that day, so as long as you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. We'll keep good notes for you.
And let me just point out that it's anticipated that the redevelopment plan and cost benefit analysis would be distributed to the commission well in advance of that meeting. So you have plenty of time to review the documents before that meeting. Then come to that meeting with your questions. PGAB will review the documents and be prepared to answer any questions that anybody might have at that meeting. So that you still have a couple of weeks before the public hearing to, if there's any follow-up that needs to occur.
So, I guess we need to make a motion to that effect. Has that been made? Do we have a second?
I didn't hear a second.
Second, so the next meeting of this commission would be on the 20th of January, 7 p.m. at this location. I need a second.
Second.
Well, thank you. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Next order of business is motion for adjournment. Certainly, excuse me.
On the public hearing, do we need to set a time?
I think the motion included time of
7
7 p.m.
7 p.m.? Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Motion for adjournment.
To adjourn?
Second, please. All in favor? Thank you. Meeting's adjourned.
Steve, good to meet you.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing you some more. Tell me about campaigning.
You bet.
Mr. Simpson, right?
Yeah, there is. Jim something. Jim, just Jim.
Just Jim. Okay.